First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Welcome back to Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler, and again, thank you for joining us. We are live here out of the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, and one of the things we get to do is have longer form conversations and segments here on this show. Wildfires are something that is on everyone's mind currently. We know that the wildfires in Oregon and Washington have burned, I believe it's over 2 million acres at this point, making it one of the worst fire seasons since at least 2000, according to the latest estimates. And of course, those fires are continuing to burn right now, so we know that is going to get even worse. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what's happening now, but really historically looking at things and different ways that you can manage the land, that the land could be managed through prescribed burns, or even how Indigenous people handled this as well when it comes to land management. We're going to talk about all of that right now with our guest. We have Chris Adlam from Oregon State University joining us. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your time. To start off, just to let everybody know, would you mind telling us just a little bit about yourself and the work that you do there at Oregon State?
Yes, of course. I work with the Oregon State University Extension Fire Program. And in the Extension Service, what we do is we provide education and support for communities around the state. For us, it's all matters fire, right? So that could be a lot of different things, from how to manage your land, how to work together with your neighbors, how agencies can plan ahead, all of that kind of thing that we need to do ahead of time to prepare our communities for wildfire.
Yeah, preparing ahead of time for all of, we know fires are going to happen, but it's hard to predict, when it's just so much of it. So when we're talking about preparation, what are some common things that you recommend for people to prepare for ahead of time when it comes to fire season?
Yeah, well, anybody who is a homeowner, of course, there's a lot that you can do around your home to reduce flammable material that could receive embers if there was a wildfire in the area. And then working out from there, there's also a lot that we need to think about in terms of the landscape. And so for a lot of our small woodland owners, people need to think ahead of time, about what their forest looks like now, how that might be different than how it would have looked in the past, how it would look if there was a fire in the area, right? What kind of fire behavior would you expect? And that's one of my areas that I focus on, is really the aspect of preparing the land for fire. And so we have a lot of tools for that. And of course, some of it is thinning. Some of it is, addressing invasive species. If you have some particularly flammable species like blackberries in certain areas, can be very problematic. And also through the use of prescribed fire, because ultimately one of the cheapest and most effective ways of getting rid of all that small material that really piles up over the years is to use fire as a tool. Now, this isn't going to be the most logical thing to do in all situations. It's not going to be the best fit for every situation and every landowner. But for some people, this is going to be really a good tool. And so one of the things that we do in the Extension Service also is provide people with educational opportunities to learn about what it means to put fire on the ground in a good way on your land proactively, so that when a wildfire comes, it just doesn't have that much there left to burn.
Getting rid of that fuel, that potential fuel that could really cause some of those problems. Is this something that's, that could be utilized more? Could that have helped in maybe preventing some of these wildfires that we're seeing now?
So what we know in many parts of the state, Oregon's a wonderful state because of how different it is in different places, right? So Eastern Oregon, Southwest Oregon, for example, very dry forests. It's going to be very different than what you'd expect if you lived on the North Coast, or in the West Cascades. These dry forests, we know that historically they would have burned about every 5 to 15 years, right? And so that fire coming through would have burnt through just a thin layer of pine needles, leaf litter, some sticks, but there wouldn't have been much there to burn because there'd only been 5 or 10 or 15 years of material building up, right? As opposed to now, much of this landscape has 100, 150 years of material piling up. And so when the fires do burn now, they are burning very differently, right? They are burning a lot more intensely, and we have much larger patches where all of the trees are killed. This is a problem because obviously it's a real concern for these forests in many parts of the state. We are really alarmed at the current rate where of forest loss in certain regions of the West that are really threatening the existence of forests altogether going into the future, right? And of course, we depend on forests for a lot of things, right? For the economy, for recreation, the wildlife habitat that they provide, the water that they provide. We have many reasons to care about these forests. And so trying to reduce the intensity of the fire is really one of the key reasons why people use controlled burns or prescribed burns. It's maybe not going to stop the fires from burning altogether, right? But when they do start, they're going to be easy to control. They're going to cause less damage to the forest, and they're going to cause less damage to adjacent communities.
Gotcha. And so that would be something that, then this is something that I guess that you advise people on, is how to do that, how to go about burning through some of that that pile up that happens.
Yeah, yeah. We offer trainings. We've done, introductory trainings for people who want to learn the basics. There are more advanced trainings for people who want to be burn leaders, right? We have a program in Oregon called the Certified Burn Manager Program. People go through that training, and there's some benefits in terms of liability protections, and they also gain the necessary skills to be able to lead those burns. And, it's something that might seem really intimidating and very technical, right? Oh, fire, of course, there's a lot of precautions that need to go into this. You don't just go out there and do it on the weekend, right? There's a lot of planning that goes into it. There's a lot of preparation. But it's also not rocket science, right? And communities around the world use fire as a tool, have always done so. Indigenous communities, of course, also ranching communities, many ranching communities in different parts of Oregon, people use fire. And more small forest landowners are getting in the game too. We have many prescribed burn associations starting up across the state. We call those PBAs, and those PBAs are basically neighbors who help each other. They come together and they pool their equipment and they work together to do this burn, because it takes many hands, right? It's a bit like haying or barn raising. It's something that you need a lot of help to get that done. And it taps into that history of that tradition of people helping each other in rural areas to do this work together. And so more and more people are doing that. There's still a lot of difficulties around some of the regulations, and a lot of concern, of course, that we need to address. And it's not something that's going to all of a sudden be popping up everywhere, but it is really great to see more and more people be interested and working together to learn about how to do this properly.
Is this something that, if done properly on somebody's property, and depending, I'm sure a number of different factors, but if done properly, that this could mitigate or even prevent some of these big wildfires that we're seeing now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we have many examples of places where there was a prescribed burn and then a wildfire burned into that area, and the area outside of the prescribed burn, all the trees were killed, really huge, intense fire. And then it got into the prescribed burn area, and that fire fell to the ground and, just crept along the ground. And that's the kind of fire that we can live with, right? It's very hard to live with a big fire with 100-foot flames, 200-foot flames, that torches everything. But if we have a fire creeping along the ground now, we can work with that. It's safer for our firefighters to engage. And that's really the goal. We have examples of places where people have done prescribed burns around their homes, and then a wildfire came through and their home survived, and their little patch of forest that they'd underburned survived, and everything else, burned, unfortunately. So that definitely does work. We know it works. We know we need a lot more of it if we want to really start making a difference too.
And as you mentioned, it requires it requires a lot of training to be able to do this correctly.
Yeah, and in our communities in Oregon, I will say we have a lot of people with knowledge because we have a lot of firefighters out there. We have fire departments who are willing to help, or different state agencies, Oregon Department of Forestry. We have a lot of people who know what they're doing and are willing to share that knowledge. And really, that's the key. If you have people who are in charge of the burn, who know what they're doing, then a lot of the other people who are there, they are just going to be watching. They're going to be holding a tool. They're going to be around the outside, just kind of keeping things safe. And that, there's opportunities for people of all sorts of backgrounds and levels of experience to participate at that level. So, yeah, you're going to need people who know how to do this. That's for sure. But it's also there are ways to start learning, and you start sort of doing the most simple stuff, and then you can sort of work your way up into doing more complicated aspects of it.
And is this something that indigenous cultures in Oregon used to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And we, take a lot of inspiration from learning more from these tribes about their traditional management of the landscape. We are learning so much, both directly from tribes and their knowledge, as well as reconstruction of historic fire regimes. A lot of tree ring studies have been done recently, including in Western Oregon, places we used to think there wasn't much fire. Indigenous people didn't do a lot of burning, and we are finding that, in fact, even in places where we didn't expect it, there was a lot of fire management going on. People would go out there and burn for all sorts of purposes, for clearing travel routes, for creating patches of new growth for deer and elk, because the new growth is more nutritious. Also for food plants, for basketry plants that grow straighter and longer, for weaving baskets. So a lot of different reasons people were burning, and we know that they would burn at different places at different times. And as a result, there was just a lot less fuel on the landscape. And so when lightning fires would start, they would run into these previously burned areas, and basically it wouldn't be a threat to the economy and livelihoods of Indigenous people through their management. And many communities people still use traditional burning practices today. So we do work often very together, and there's a lot of great conversations around what we can learn from indigenous knowledge and Western science.
What would it take for this to become more of a regular fire management tool, run by the state or the federal government, something like that?
Well, one of those challenges that we see right now is that as fires get worse every year, we're looking at trends that are quite alarming. We're looking at a doubling or tripling of the area burned by mid-century. We've already seen the intensity of fires multiplied by 8 over the last 4 decades. These trends are not good. And one of the problems is that we end up spending more and more money trying to fight these fires, right? Which we have to, in a sense, but we are also going to have to start shifting that towards investing more ahead of time, right? We need that prevention, that preventative action ahead of time, because that is really what is going to start bringing these fires into something more controllable. And right now we're sort of on this treadmill of just trying to catch up with the emergency when it happens, and we spend very little of our resources by comparison on doing preventative measures like thinning, like prescribed burning, like helping private landowners and communities to prepare. So that's the biggest shift that we need to start negotiating, because we're not going to stop these fires by just throwing more airplanes at it, throwing more firefighters at it. We have the most firefighting capacity we've ever had, and fires keep getting worse. So we know this is not the solution, and we need to start taking some of that effort and putting it towards managing the land ahead of time.
Well, Because for other people who want to find out more information, about this and about these studies and about how this all works, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, well, OSU Extension has a lot of publications on prescribed fire. We have a prescribed fire basics series that explains all of the basics you'd be curious about. We're currently creating a guidebook, a lot of resources on the OSU Extension website. The Oregon Department of Forestry also has a prescribed fire program, and you can look at for more resources on their website for people who are interested in, for example, the Certified Burn Manager course, which is more for people with experience. But those are what I'd recommend. If you also want to see a prescribed burn, then one of your opportunities is to reach out to the local prescribed burn association, and we have a directory of prescribed burn associations in Oregon at the OSU Extension Fire Program website. And those associations, when they're burning, those burns are open to anybody, open to the public. So if you want to go and see what it's like, if you want to go participate, you want to go and learn some basic skills, that's a great opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us to have this discussion and talk about this. I really appreciate your insight and knowledge. And just talking about the ways that we can try to, stop some of these gigantic fires that we have going on right now. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being here on Fox 12 Now.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And for everybody watching, we are live streaming here. We need to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll continue throughout the afternoon. If breaking news happens, I'll be here for you with that as well. But we also have plenty more discussions coming up too. So sit right there. Back in just a couple of minutes with more Fox 12 Now.